Hi, guys. I am back for chapter 13. I'm excited to keep reading the book. Um, Lots of crazy stuff has been happening. Mary's been moved to a different hospital facility. Now she's living over on Brother Island, um, basically in full blown quarantine all the time. She doesn't get a say so when really where she goes or when she goes. She just went to court. They She had an attorney represent her, and they fought to try and have her released, and it did not work. So now Mary is going back to Brother Island, and we'll see what happens. So this is chapter 13, in which Mary learns to keep her germs to herself. Mary remained on North Brother Island. From her bungalow, she wrote letters to Doctors Herman Biggs and Josephine Baker and George Soper. The letters were, according to Biggs' biographer, violently threatening. In the letters, Mary vowed that if she were ever released from North Brother Island, she would take a gun and kill the doctors. Thanks. We don't know how Soper or Biggs felt about the threat, but Baker later wrote, "I cannot blame her for feeling that way." She could write an excellent letter. So far as composition and spelling were concerned, was all George Soper said. She wrote a clear, bold hand with remarkable uniformity. On a snowy Monday, February 21st, 1910, if Biggs, Baker, and Soper read the New York Times, they had cause to worry. There, buried on page 18, appeared a short article with the headline, "Typhoid Mary Freed." 2 days earlier, the new health commissioner, Dr. Ernest J. Lederle, had offered Mary Mallon a deal if she agreed not to cook, if she promised to take hygienic precautions to protect those with whom she came into contact, if she reported monthly to the health department, she would be released. Mary agreed, and Lederle handed her an affidavit to sign. He wanted her to put her promise into writing. But Mary did. Writing. "I shall change said occupation upon being released from Riverside Hospital." She also agreed to report to the health department and to take measures to protect all persons with whom I may come in contact from any infection. To the last promise, she stubbornly added the phrase, "which it is possible I may cause." No doctor would ever convince Mary that she was a typhoid carrier. But Lederle was satisfied with her promise and signature, and possibly relieved to be rid of the woman. She had not been cured, he said, but she had been taught how to take care of herself. He told the New York Times reporter that Mary had learned the precautions she needed to take. "As long as she observes them, the precautions, I have little fear that she will be a danger to her neighbors," said Lederle. He felt sympathy for Mary. "What will she do now?" he asked. "She's a good cook. Until her detention had always made a comfortable living. I really do not know what she can do," he added, and he was trying to find work for her. Who would hire Mary? Her name had been splattered in every major New York City newspaper and newspapers across the country. How would she escape the stigma of Typhoid Mary? In 1910, there were no government assistance programs, such as unemployment benefits. Workers such as Mary were simply fired and replaced. No wages, no severance pay. She had no skills other than cooking, no education. She had no family to take her in. All she had was Mr. Breihof. But that wasn't Lederle's or even the health department's problem. They felt no obligation to help Mary. Once she signed the affidavit, their job was done. She was now the public's problem. "She was incarcerated for the public's good," said Lederle, "and now it is up to the public to take care of her." Some might say the health department no longer needed Mary. They had learned all they could from their experimental medications and laboratory tests. The doctors and health officials had become famous. "She has been a great service to humanity," Dr. Josephine Baker would later write in her autobiography. "There have been many typhoid carriers, recognized since her time, but she was the first charted case, and for that distinction she paid in a lifelong imprisonment. Mary quietly packed up her few belongings on February 19, 1910. She boarded the ferry that transported her across the East River to Manhattan. The river was brown and icy, the current was strong, the air cold and brisk. After nearly 3 years, Mary Mallon was free. Over the next year, Mary reported regularly to the New York City Department of Health. She did not handle food for others. She did not work as a cook. She did not kill Biggs, baker, or sober. But she found it difficult to support herself. As Luttrell had promised, he found her work as a laundress, but washing clothes was physically demanding domestic work, and the lowest paying. A laundress had to prepare her own starch, bleach, and detergents. She had to boil water and lift heavy pails. She was now 41 years old. For a person born in 1869, the average life expectancy was less than 50 years old. Wow. Life expectancy for the average 40-year-old today is about 80. In her previous job as a cook, Mary had been paid well, and she likely missed her usual wages. Good-paying jobs for women were scarce. Those who knew her reported that she read a great deal and seldom missed the daily paper, usually the New York Times. Perhaps she saw her name in the December 2nd, 1910 Times article, Guide a Walking Typhoid Factory, about an upstate woodsman in the Adirondack Mountains who had infected 36 tourists with the disease. 2 had died. More than half of the article was devoted to Mary Mallon. The woodsman was not arrested. The New York State Department of Health said there is no state law by which a human carrier of typhoid bacilli can be kept from spreading contagion and disease. The woodsman, known as Typhoid John, agreed. He agreed to treatment which the New York City Department of Health would provide as soon as it could find him a boarding place. Unlike Mary Mallon, Typhoid John remained anonymous and soon disappeared from the headlines. Surely Mary must have wished she could disappear too. The next spring, sometime in May 1911, Mary's friend Breihof suffered a heart attack. She helped him get to a hospital where he later died. This was another huge blow to Mary. Although Breihof had betrayed her to Soper 4 years earlier, she had clearly forgiven him. Breihof had stood by her throughout her incarceration. He had delivered her specimens to the Ferguson laboratories, and now he was dead. Later that year, Mary turned to her attorney, George Francis O'Neill. She hired him to represent her in the lawsuit against New York City and the Board of Health for false imprisonment. She asked $50,000 in damages because she had been detained illegally. Her civil rights had been violated. The Board of Health, Mary contended, had made it impossible for her to follow her trade of cooking. Thus, the lawsuit said, her chances of making a living are greatly reduced. The case, reported the New York American, will demonstrate just how far the Board of Health powers go and whether the department has the legal right to banish a person to confinement in absence of a court commitment. It is quite a problem, said O'Neill. If a municipality can, without legal warrant or due process of law, clap someone in jail upon the word of some medical man. In filing the suit, O'Neill warned that the Board of Health's police power was dangerous. If the Board of Health can act this way with anyone who is alleged to be a germ carrier, yet who never suffered from the disease, he said, then it can put thousands upon thousands of persons who suffered at some time or another from typhoid fever in confinement because authorities agree for quite some time after recovery from typhoid, evidence of the disease remains in your system. But the case never made it to court. O'Neill advised Mary that she had no right for a civil action. In other words, the court dismissed her case because a judge decided it lacked merit. As Mary continued to honor the terms of her release, As she struggled to find work and to make ends meet, George Soper and others continued to lecture about Typhoid Mary time and time again. Soper was credited with her discovery and detention. His name appeared in newspapers and professional journals. On September 26, 1912, George Soper and Herman Biggs addressed the International Hygiene Congress held in Washington, D.C. Throughout the conference, the words Typhoid Mary were evoked again and again. Mary's case was known throughout the world, reported the New York Times. For a private person such as Mary, who never talked about herself and who resented publicity, it was humiliating to open a newspaper and see her name. No doubt it felt like another peep show. Sometime that fall, after the conference, no one knows exactly when, Mary stopped reporting to the New York City Department of Health, despite the fact that the words Typhoid Mary appeared in the New York City newspapers from time to time. No one noticed that Mary had slipped away. Not Soper, not Biggs, not Park, and not Baker. Perhaps not even the readers of the New York Times. They may have missed the very last sentence in a November 29, 1914 article titled Typhoid Carriers. On the second page of Section C. There it said, "It is reported that this woman, nicknamed Typhoid Mary, has now been lost sight of. Will they find her again when she becomes the center of another epidemic?" No one knew where Mary Mallon was or what she was doing. Interesting. So, she basically got fed up, is what it sounds like. Wow. She tried to fight the court case again. It still didn't work. Her one and only true ally, Mr. Breihof, passed away. All of the doctors and everyone continued to get famous and wealthy and noticed in the medical world. And Mary was still isolated and had to be working as a laundry maid, basically. She couldn't cook. She had to report to the health department and all of that. And I guess she eventually got tired of it. So let's see what happens next.